Welcome to Sense of Place Season 15. Buck and I were just chatting, and he keeps joking that he's going to run away and not come out when I call him out. And I was telling him, I was like, listen, buddy, we're basketball players. This is fourth quarter. We're down by 1, 3 seconds to go. We stay in the game, okay? And he said that's way easier. So hopefully in a second when I invite him out, you guys will cheer loud enough that he does decide to come out. So we are so fortunate to have Buck Jones joining us tonight for of Salmon and basketball, two things that I like a lot. And Buck is one of those people who I've known for quite some time, and just casually at first, and then over the years got to know him more and more. And when you guys see me, call, should we take it? Good? Okay. When you guys see me, I'm up here talking, but really a huge part and the most important part and my favorite part of my job is I just get to spend a lot of time listening. And with Buck over the years, I did a lot of listening and increasingly found that when I was listening, I was learning things about this place in addition to things about Buck. And so then I started to get more formal about let's make sure we sort of meet regularly so I know what's going on in your circles. And anytime I'm doing that sort of connecting or research or more focused work, I need to take notes, but I try to do it by hand so I can keep eye contact and just keep things simple. And I finally, a little over a year ago, told him, I want to meet and I got to have a laptop because I can't keep up with all the things you're telling me and all the acronyms and things. And so I would just sit there typing. And by the end of the conversation, he started talking about his national basketball fame, and I thought, okay, enough is enough. We're no longer going to do this just in coffee shops. We're going to come have you join us at Sense of Place so you can do it with all of you. So that is what we're going to get to do tonight. Before we get to that, though, I want to let you know, if you're new to Sense of Place, the way it works is we're going to have our show. In this case, it's a conversation. And then we're going to invite you all in to be a part of the Q&A, which is often where great things come up that I haven't thought of. So be thinking of what you're curious about, what questions you might have. And we've got a little surprise at the end for tonight. And I also want to take a moment and thank, in particular, we have a sponsor tonight, the Healthy Community Collective, which is just what it sounds like. We have a group of organizations here in the Gorge who got national recognition for saying, instead of trying to keep this community healthy by us each working in our own little group, what if we band together and try to keep the Gorge healthy by working together? And they're doing it for all of us, and on a national level, they got recognized as really breaking some new ground in how we can do things better here. And Buck is connected with them, and they have helped support this show tonight. And so if you guys don't mind giving it a round of applause for the Healthy Community Collective. Which is really most, or not most, but probably a lot of you, so you just gave yourself a round of applause, so you're welcome. Okay. And then the other group I want to thank is Mount Adams Institute. As many of you know, Sense of Place is a program of Mount Adams Institute. They are a nonprofit based here in the Gorge. They're up in Trout Lake. Many of them are the volunteers that you chatted with on your way in. They are an incredible group of people with a huge amount of love and passion for helping people connect to the natural world and the out of doors in a lot of different ways. And I feel really lucky to have them get to be on their team and have them supporting Sense of Place. So thank you, Mount Adams Institute. Thanks. So, like I mentioned, I've known Buck for a number of years. I actually first came across Buck when I was doing research for a podcast episode on tribal fishing in the Pacific Northwest. We'll talk some about that tonight. And so that was just email exchange, didn't get to know him that well. And then maybe a year or so later, I'm at a Columbia Gorge Tourism Alliance meeting, and there's Buck. He actually, at that meeting, made fun of me because at one point I was talking about something, and I said, and then you do the number sign. And he looked at me and said, "You mean a hashtag, Sarah?" And I kind of like, he's a little older than me. Like, aren't I supposed to be the cool young one? But he put me in my place. And I thought that was kind of fun, so I nosed him. And then over the course of the years, like I said, I started to do sort of more focused research and trying to understand all the different circles that he's running in, because I obviously can't run in them. And I think tonight is a great example of how sense of place has evolved over our 15 years. It originated with finding people who could really convey what they knew from a lecture or by giving a presentation. And that is really where some people shine. And I love having those people at Sense of Place. But I also have found over the years that there's a lot of people who that's not really where they shine, where they're going to really be able to convey the information and knowledge they have. It's maybe in a more conversational setting or something that's just a little more relaxed. And so that's something that we added into how we do Sense of Place. And I love it because it gives me a chance to get to do what I do when I'm not here, which is listen and chat with interesting people like Buck. So if you guys will help me invite Buck Jones to come out. Hopefully he does come out. That wasn't so bad, was it? All right, you can be there. That's what I'm looking for. Hold on one sec. This is my usual seat. Okay. All right. Oh, Buck's mic was turned on. Hold on, let me see if it's muted. Yep, okay. Now talk.
Good morning. Hello?
You happy yet? Okay, well, Alex is nodding, but I think you're good. Okay.
Okay.
All right. How does this compare to a fourth quarter buzzer beater? What's it feel?
I wasn't very good at buzzer beaters.
Oh.
My brother was good at buzzer beaters. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Was he a post as well?
No, he was a guard.
How tall is he?
He's about 6'2",
And how tall are you?
like 6'5".
Okay. I want you to know what I did tonight, just to kind of, I had to level up.
And they're very good basketball shoes, so.
I know, they are. What number were you?
44.
Okay, I was 12.
Yeah.
My brother still remembers all my stats. Do you remember any of your stats? No. Neither do I. I mean, I do remember my best game, but you said you don't remember your...
No, I remember close losses more than I remember best games.
Okay, you're more like glass half empty on that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll get to the games. But I first wanted to go back to the way I first met you. Is I remember someone, I was researching this tribal fishing episode, and someone said, oh, you should reach out to Buck Jones. And so I probably Googled you and looked you up on CritFic, and which we'll make sure we talk about what that is. And it said that your title was Salmon Marketing. And I gotta be honest, when I read that, I was like, salmon don't need marketing. We all love salmon. What is this? So maybe tell us what CritFic is, and then at that time, what did that mean, salmon marketing? What were you doing for them?
Okay, so CRIFTIC is an acronym for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, which is a technical and an advisory arm of 4 tribes that have treaty fishing rights along the Columbia River here and their tributaries. Those tribes being my tribe, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Warm Springs, and the 2 tribes in Oregon, Yakima Nation on the state of Washington, and the Nez Perce tribe in the state of Idaho. So salmon wars and fishing wars going on, especially up in the Nisqually area, but we also had tribal members that were here that was a treaty right, for us to fish, that was getting arrested for fishing. And so the tribes was battling, either the states or the federal government, and it took a lot of resources for the tribes to go on their own and fight these battles. So it became like a collaboration or whatever of the tribes, because salmon is really culturally relevant to our people. Some of the lot of the religion that we have, where we have first salmon ceremonies, it just made sense to form that, So was formed in '77, and it's really kind of grown into, we have over 100 staff in Portland of fish science departments, watershed department, fish management department. All organizations need human resources and lawyers, of course, and policy. And then we also have our enforcement arm right here in Hood River out there on West Cliff, and that really strengthened our sovereignty, because we're unique as sovereign nations or whatever, that the policing part was could control the tribal laws that our tribe set for our fishers, and they're deputized, and if Sarah's going 75 in a 60 down the road, they can pull her over too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought it was just if I was fishing.
Yeah, no, but so yeah, and then, yeah, and we have our own genetics lab in southeastern Idaho, just because another reason of our sovereign, we just didn't sometimes agree with the numbers that we would get back from other entities, and so, like at the University of Idaho, that was a collaboration in Hagerman, Idaho, with the University of Idaho. And then we also got a fishing site maintenance, and the managers here, I'm really glad to see my brother Miguel here. And that was where I first started fishing site maintenance that takes care of the in lieu and treaty fishing access sites that are along the river. So
You just blew through so much that we were going to talk about. I think what's, and we're going to go touch on a lot of those things further, but I think if you guys left with anything tonight, I hope it would be a little spark of curiosity to learn more about the tribal fishing history in not just the gorge, but the Pacific Northwest, because we won't begin to be able to touch that history here, and it's much huger than any one person could tell, and it's super important to this place. So one of the things I want to go back to, though, is for folks who maybe didn't grow up in the Pacific Northwest, and even for some of us who did, these 4 treaty tribes, that's a really big deal. And when you talk about a sovereign nation, we're essentially nations within a nation here with these 4 treaty tribes. And the role of salmon to tribal life, do you want to talk some about, it's not just a food thing, it's a culture and a life and a religion. So maybe share some of why all this stuff you just shared is so important.
Well, the salmon, like I said, are really culturally relevant to our people. In some of our creation stories, the salmon gave up its life when we was poor, pitiful people. Gave up its life to feed us, and it goes out in the ocean 3 to 5 years or whatever, and so that made us stewards of the land and the water that it returns to. We've always been sustainable. Our people have always fished here, since time immemorial. And the chiefs, when Salilo Falls, would say, the salmon are back or whatever, but we're not going to fish right now because those salmon have a home that they got to go to or whatever. And so we've carried that on, and it's a traditional first food for us now, and it's where we honor the salmon when it returns in the springtime, because it's a seasonal cycle, and we live in a reciprocal world where that we have to take care of that water, we have to take care of the forests and the things where they return. So we'll have a first salmon feast, and we'll have on here on the Columbia and our member tribes. And so it's just been, that made us, like I said, stewards of the land, and our people have really believed that, because if the salmon don't return and things are really, where was millions and millions of salmon, and they're not coming back like they used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that or whatever, but I think that, and just short term is how I'd explain it. Like I say, honor the plants and stuff when they come back, for, the first, the roots and things like that. And so it's all from the teachings from our ancestors that we carry on this way of life.
So going back, knowing that salmon are that important, going back to this role of salmon marketing, what were you actually doing? What did it mean to be working in salmon marketing for CRITFIC many years ago?
So salmon marketing actually became an issue for our tribal members. So we have about 700 tribal fishers that fish here along the Columbia or whatever. So in the late to mid 80s, late to early 90s, our commission meets monthly in Portland. It's members of our 4 tribes that meet, kind of like a board or whatever. And they start identifying that the salmon that our tribal fishers was catching, arbitrarily, I'd say it started out at a couple dollars a pound when they was fishing, and you'd sell it to a wholesale buyer. And then it started, as markets fluctuate and, the market gets kind of flooded with fish, that same beautiful fish was being sold to wholesale buyers for 25 cents a pound. And 25 cents a pound, and then you're seeing it in markets in Portland and stuff at, $8 to $10 to $18 and $20 a pound. And so the commission came up with a plan to develop a salmon marketing program, and so they hired a person that was the predecessor that in my position that I currently hold, where he developed quality handling classes, how to handle the fish right, developed working with food scientists and things like that to develop hazard analysis, critical control point, HACCP classes that teach you how to handle the fish from the time it's caught from the net all the way through the process going to the processor. A lot of education with both the fishers and with our tribal members and even the wholesale buyers, because I was fishing at that time, and I remember, a truck would be there and we would unload our fish or whatever, and you're grabbing fish and you're throwing them up there and they're hitting, and you're doing it to try to do it for speed, but at that same time you're hurting that fish, you're bruising that fish. And so we had to learn that you can't do that, and you got to ice them and do things like that because you're not going to improve the quality, you got to maintain the quality. So that was been a part of the whole model. And actually the person that did that job was housed under our chief financial, our finance program or whatever, and he was a tribal member, the CFO at that time, and he hired he was a non-tribal person, but he developed all these kind of classes and building these relationships with the head of the Washington State University Food Science Department, has been doing HACCP classes for us for many years, and we've probably put over 600 to 700 people through those classes, and we're like a leader in that for our fisheries, for developing these kind of programs. And actually he was a basketball referee. Yeah. And
Wait, was there some insider work for you?
Yeah, so when he retired or whatever, and then I started working at CRITFIC in 2004, and I started in the fishing site maintenance, driving. I was living in Milwaukee at the time, and our office for fishing site maintenance is in the Dalles. So I was driving 180 miles just on a commute, just to get to my work, and I did that for 7 years. That was my very first job at CRITFIC. But what that allowed me to do, and we haven't even got into how I got to the river many years ago, or whatever. It allowed me to meet all the fishers at all these treaty fishing access and loose sites, because when I first started fishing, I had a narrow perspective of right up here at Stanley Rock of this is the fishery, and it allowed me to meet these individual fishers and and meet them on a one-to-one person kind of deal. And then when the previous person that set up the model was like a John Wooden of basketball. He set up all these models and stuff like that, and it was like like, I don't know if I should apply for this job. And I start talking to some people or whatever, and they says like, Buck, if you don't put your name in there, they can't tell you no. Made a lot of sense. And so I did, and then I just I got fortunate in to get that position as salmon marketing. And with that salmon marketing, what we've been trying to do is develop high-end markets, keep established markets with our wholesale buyers, try to get them into farmers markets around here and stuff like that, and develop national and regional markets for our fishers. I mentioned that the person that took this position, he set up all these models. And at one time, I rode a bike I was a bike rider, and I considered myself like, hey, I'm just like a bike mechanic or whatever. So I might have to tighten some spokes and change a flat tire and do things, but the model was already there. And so I just been kind of trying to improve that. But something that, and I see still a valuable colleague of mine or whatever, is that I mentioned he was a non-tribal person. And so the tribal first foods and the tribal food sovereignty and stuff like that, he knew about it, but he didn't like, nothing against him, it's just the way it is. He didn't live it or whatever. And I tried, and I kind of brought that into this position or whatever, where it's actually developed into a kind of a whole different platform or a whole different part of the salmon marketing or whatever, to share the story that I shared about the culture of the salmon and how us as tribal people, food and sovereign is kind of the same. So we've actually developed a salmon marketing now is in a whole new, and I know I'm talking about things that we said.
No, you're fine, you're fine.
Was gonna talk
I
about.
knew you were going to break the rule.
Yeah. And recently we've got a whole new department, a community development department, where my salmon marketing, actually, they put in a new title of food sovereignty into CRIFTIC, and that's only been since the beginning of 2024. So that's just really kind of long-winded story of your question, I guess.
No, you're fine. Well, I think we're going to come back to it some.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is kind of, between you and me, we're kind of doing an Oreo cookie. So that's some of the Oreo cookie part. Then we're going to have some cream with the basketball, and then we'll go back to Oreo cookie. Does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to put a quick pause on the salmon piece, and we'll come back to it. Because before you were here in the Gorge, you were a kid growing up in Pendleton.
Yes, Pilot Rock, actually.
Okay. So take me out to Pilot Rock. What was Buck Jones like as a little kid? I'm trying to picture you.
I was a cowboy.
What?
A cowboy. We owned horses and stuff like that, and I was raised around horses. My father actually became a farrier. I was a horseshoer, and I wore cowboy boots, and I didn't know how to tie shoes probably till about the third grade, because I was always wearing cowboy boots. Yeah, and I so was raised around horses and stuff like that, and then was a horseman. Worked on, we lived out in the country and stuff like that, and had horses, and that was part of my life. My dad, like I said, became a horseshoer. He said he was perfect for it because he goes, I'm short, stout, and stupid. And so it was a rough trade. It was a rough trade, and I had horses, and was raised around horses, and that was my thing. I actually used to be a jockey in the Pendleton Roundup, doing Indian relay races before they was really as popular as they are, and things like that. So I was a rural, and then kind of came along to sports started becoming a part of my life, because my father was an athlete in high school and stuff like that. He actually was on the Pilot Rock last boys basketball state championship team in 1959 or whatever. So he started on the reservation, started forming these youth teams called the Upper Mackay Creek, because that's where we're raised, in Upper Mackay Creek, Oregon. And he started having bringing youth, the tribal youth, to little tournaments, and we was little guys, probably 8 years old and stuff like that. And he had like 12 and under teams, 13 to 15-year-old teams, and then like 18 and under, and even girls teams that he would take us to different reservations, and we would play against other tribal communities. We'd go to Warm Springs, we'd go to Yakima, we'd go to Colville, and that became like basketball. It was like there was no club basketball then. That was like our club. There was no AAU or whatever. And my brother, my younger brother, we would practice. We would practice under a street light, hours and hours and hours, and practice shooting, and Bill Shonley and doing announcing, and I'm Jeff Petrie and Sidney Wicks, and that was kind of our life. And then what really happened too is that sports really became really important to me. Well, it came to a point in where my father said that you know that you got a horse, you got horses, and are you gonna take care of these horses, or are you gonna do your basketball? And he took my horses away from me because I wasn't able to, I guess, maintain them as I should have. They're supposed to eat before you and stuff like that. So and that's just the way it was. And it was, and it was kind of a good life lesson for me or whatever. But then I applied myself a lot more to basketball and stuff like that, and went through Pendleton High School, and then just didn't really kind of take advantage, and that's part of what my story is. I was a all-state basketball player. I actually graduated in telling my age here, so I don't mind or whatever. I graduated in 1981, and there was a state metro basketball team all-star game or whatever, and I was on the state team or whatever, and then the players voted at the camp, or the couple of weeks of practice we had, as I got the players for the state team, and then the Metro team, and I don't know how many people know, but AC Green was a Laker or whatever, was the player for the Metro team or whatever. And I think I lost that picture, but I had a picture of AC Green when we had it, and things like that. So I didn't really take advantage of the opportunities that I had for my basketball. I had a scholarship to a well-renowned JUCO college or whatever, and I didn't take advantage of that. And sometimes I look at it like, what would have happened if I would have done that? I might not be where I'm at today without those, I guess, challenges or things that I just didn't apply myself or whatever. And at that time, you could kind of slide by or whatever, not like it is now where you have to carry a high GPA and stuff like that. And then I kind of started, went there and kind of drifted away. But I've always thought about that, like, I might not be where I'm at. So that's part of my story or whatever. I might not have met the mother of my children. I might not have my children. I might not be in the tribal culture, that I am now and stuff like that. So there's some things I would change, but there's a lot of things I wouldn't change on that. And so I started doing the independent and tribal basketball at that time or whatever. And I was different. Like, our tribes were nomadic and went season to season. And that was me at that time as a young man, and 18, 19, 20 years old. I started going to these tribal basketball tournaments throughout Indian country, and kind of lived that life for a long time or whatever. When basketball season was over, then it was slow pitch softball. And then we go to play slow pitch softball and stuff like that. And that was it, because there's a, tribal basketball is huge throughout Indian country and stuff like that. So I went and kind of, that's what I did. When you do something forever and you're doing something all the time, you became pretty good. And I was pretty tall for a tribal athlete and for a tribal person, and so that's what I did. And then.
Well, can I stop you real quick? I want to know a little bit more about. I mean, are there other? Because I don't think I knew until I met you that there was a separate tribal league. I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Kat Brigham was talking about playing basketball, and it just sort of passed by me. But then I was talking, and it does, like, are there national tribal soccer teams, leagues, or softball? I mean, basketball seems to be sort of,
Yeah.
I mean, because it's the best sport, obviously, but it does seem to have sort of a unique. I didn't even, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something that our tribal members have been able to do throughout Indian country or whatever, it doesn't take much, like I talked about when I was younger. My brother and I, we could go out there and act like we was the Blazers and just shoot around at a basket or whatever. It doesn't take, you don't even really need a basket to improve yourself in basketball. You can dribble on the grass and do things like that, and it seems kind of crazy or whatever, but it is true. And so I think that tribes, and it kind of would say res ball or whatever, but there's been actual,
You were you looking for that?
Yeah.
Well, share
Like
it out.
actually, this was actually the huge tournament at our time or whatever. This was in 2014 in Yakima, Washington, 59th annual tribal basketball tournament, where they'd have these tournaments throughout Indian country or whatever. And like the oldest basketball tournament is in the Klamath area or whatever. I think it's the 70th or 75th year they've been doing it. And so there's been people that have been playing basketball for tribes for many years or whatever. And I just think that it's kind of been its own tribe things or whatever. But we're starting to see, like when I was younger or whatever, the only ones that was playing like division basketball for tribes was females. There was only a few females that was playing Division I basketball. Renalte Vicente from the Navajo, another person that played at University of Nevada at Las Vegas, and then you go a little bit later, and now we're starting to get men, and then you can even just go recently or whatever, where Shoni Schimmel who's raised on our reservation, played in the WNBA. And so now we're starting to see, that a man that I played against, his son was on the Golden State Warriors, Lindy Waters. He's a tribal basketball player that's in the NBA, and somebody that is Miguel, and I know his father or whatever, John Beauchamp, his son, Marjon Beauchamp, is playing for the LA Clippers. And now we're starting to see where it's catching up, where the tribal members are playing and stuff like that. And that says a lot right there, because like I said, in the mid '80s, it was only females. You never heard about players that was playing at Division I and stuff like that. And there's a lot of history and things, not wanting to leave your reservation and not having the schoolwork being important and stuff like that, kind of like with me or whatever. That's what was, I was, like I said, I just didn't apply myself to do it. I could just do basketball. So I think
you did it. Go ahead.
But I think that, that, like I say, it's been, there was people before me playing basketball and stuff like that, and the game's changed or whatever, shoot, I would drive all the way to Utah or whatever to go play for, and you get some kind of awards, jackets, and things like that. Well, I mean, I drive all the way halfway across the country to go play basketball because I love basketball, and it was I was young and I had the freedom and
who was your rival team when you were, let's say, high school? Like, who was the rival team for you? Because mine was Oregon City.
At that time, we played in the Intermountain Conference or whatever. So Pendleton, you could travel one weekend, you'd be in Ontario and Baker, and then the next weekend you're down in Redmond and Bend or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was a big spread out league or whatever, and that was, I think it was 3A then or whatever. So the team there, there's always been a rivalry between Hermiston and Pendleton. That's just a natural rivalry or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Do you remember? Because I can tell you, my rivalry was Oregon City, but the years that I was in high school, they were the -- team in the country.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it really wasn't much of a rivalry.
Yeah, my daughters went to Brad Smith, Oregon City camp.
Oh,
so
you guys
yeah,
went
yeah,
where you had to run between each thing. You don't slow down.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and I remember, yeah.
Yeah. So
So Hermiston, what do you remember? I mean, did you come out on top against him usually? Or?
We did. I think our senior year we won league or whatever, and they kind of went back and forth. But it was always a rivalry. I mean, back then, you had junior high games and teams in football and things, and basketball and baseball. Those days are done now. You don't hardly see those things, at least now or whatever. So we'd always kind of grown up, it was 50-50, but we got him in the thing. We never made it out of high school to the state tournament or whatever. My late father's got one on me. He's a state champion. Something I could never get.
So I want to kind of go from basketball to coming back to the Gorge. So you're growing up. You're playing. You're doing some work with your dad and being a horseman, and to a certain extent, and then you really start to take your focus into basketball. And you have a chance. You get a school life where you leave Pendleton and you come to the Gorge. So what brought you to the Gorge?
So as I mentioned or whatever, that basketball season, it's during the fall. Go play basketball. Summer, then it's springtime, go play softball. Because it was the same thing too. There'd be a lot of softball tournaments and stuff like that you could go to reservations when they'd be like at powwows and stuff, and you could play softball, And so that was part of the season. And then one of my teammates in my tribal basketball was a tribal fisher that lived up in the Wishram area. And he says, "Oh, Buck, you got a driver's license. Just come down to the river and come fish or whatever." People with driver's license, they're hard to come by with tribes and stuff like that. And then he told me that, and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm ready to come down." And it never really worked out. And it worked. I tried that for a couple of years, and then, actually, I think I should go back a step. Not being from the river or whatever, I didn't do gill netting and do fishing like that or whatever. My father did take us in the tributaries of the reservation back home or whatever, to the Grand Round River, to the Imnaha River, to the North Fork of the John Day River, and we would gaff salmon. And gaffing salmon he was, like I said, he was a horseman, and he would get a pitchfork tying, and he would make a hook on it. And then it would put a barb on it and put a hook, and they get a pole, like a skinny pole or whatever, 8 feet pole or whatever, and then he put like a tin around that, and he put that hook on the end of that pole, and then it had rope on it, and he would half hitch it down that pole or whatever. So do about maybe 3 feet from the end, and then he start tying it down, then tie it down. And he would go to the pools because the salmon like in that cool water, and they'd go under these banks, and he used that pole to poke them out and stuff like that. And it was kind of like a hunting thing. And then, there they go. Then he'd run down and chase that salmon, and then he would hook it or whatever. And then when they hooked the salmon, that would come off that pole, and then it would give you play, and that was how I fished or whatever. So that was my first thing into salmon or whatever, and it was like what we would do, we'd go, like I say, I was a little guy, and there was these pools in the North Fork of the John Day where probably as deep as where this roof is or whatever, and you'd see those salmon down there. And my father and my uncles and cousins and stuff like that, they would put on goggles, and they put on those flippers, and they would dive down to that river and into that bottom, and they would hook those, and they would get dragged around and stuff like that. And I was never old enough to do that, but that was my first foray into salmon. And so that was taking advantage of our sovereignty and doing that or whatever. You know, it was great times or whatever. And then, like I said, my friend that asked me to come to the river, it didn't work out. But then there was one of my friends, I wish he was here tonight, that I actually was a kind of, at one time I had went with one of our tribal members at the time back at Umatilla or whatever, and at all these basketball tournaments, he would always be really supportive of us, and he'd be sitting way in the back, let's go Pendleton, and I'd hear him clapping and stuff like that, and I didn't really know him or whatever. And then I had a tribal fisher that came down one year, and I just says, like, oh, can you just take me down to the river? He goes, you're going to the river, when it was fall time or whatever. And actually across the river here, where the Mount Adams Visitor Center is, that was a long time ago. There was a house there. There was a house there that was owned by the settlers and the Gaudis, and he dropped me off, and that was like, and I didn't know that brother at that time, that late brother, and that was my first thing into fishing, and then it was fall time, and like I got my rain gear and got my stuff, and then we started fishing right up here at Stanley Rock at Colebrook Beach there, and I was using it as like. I'm an athlete, you know. I'm gonna give me those lead lines and let me pull those nets, and then I learned how to pick fish and do stuff like that. And at that same time, we talked about the marketing and the market of fish or whatever. One of their mother, their late mother, that way, Mary Gowdy Settler, was buying fish down at the base of Dog Mountain over there. There's a little property right there, and so she was buying fish. And so we would fish here. You know, you fish at night because the salmon are smart. You know, you got to use black tape and stuff like that, because they'll come up to a net and then, oh, if there's silver there, they won't see it, and then they'll go around it or whatever. And then so we fish at night. And then we would take those fish down to the river, or down to the, it's called Subsecan. I think it was an old steam engine dock many years ago or whatever. And she had a little processing center there, and we would clean fish. And I thought, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna get this fish and I'm gonna clean it. And she was like, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. You get out of there. And it was really was. You know, she was raised on the river or whatever, so she I mean, totes of fish or whatever, and so she's and just like done like that, and we had a processing line that was stainless steel, and they would clean it and stuff like that, and she could cut salmon so fast that she could plug up. There was 8 people behind her, and they couldn't keep up with her because she could cut fish that fast or whatever, and so what I learned or whatever is like, well. I'm young and I'm athletic, but I can push these totes around on pallet jacks and stuff, and I can put those salmon so that it's productive. And she puts that knife right in those gills and takes that head off and just go. And then what that did or whatever, we kept that line going or whatever. And then at the end of the line, you know, they'd clean it. There'd be water, and they'd take all the blood and the blood lines out and stuff like that. And then at the end, there was another tote, like with ice and stuff like that, and then they would layer that, and I put ice on there, and then we'd put it in the freezer, and it was kind of like my learning of where my marketing is right now or whatever. It was my sanitation plan, it was my HACCP guides and stuff like that, and then she actually, you know, we did that, and I was there used to be a split transmission on trucks, and I knew how to drive that, so we drive trucks up there. But without those lessons that she taught me or whatever, you know, after we'd be done doing fish, you know, we'd layer that fish and we'd ice it and make sure they had a small refrigerator and stuff like that. And then I noticed that her and her daughter or whatever, they would get the hoses out and they would clean all the blood, take all clean the facility so it was ready for the next thing. And I really kind of took an interest in that. As like, hey, you know, this is really important part of this process or whatever. And so, like I said, that was my sanitation plan. That was my HACCP guides. You know, not grabbing the fish by the tail so you're bruising the, you know, breaking the bloodlines and the backbones and stuff like that. And she ended up trusting me to become, like, I became a good eye at, you know, this fish, we can tell it's kind of been in the net too long, we can't buy that fish. Kind of made me the bad guy, but it was quality control too or whatever, so I was learning, and she gave me that kind of responsibility that I kind of I ran with it. They took me in for numerous years, and knew I was going to do my basketball after that and stuff like that. And without those lessons that they taught me and gave me the tools for my toolbox, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in my position with Kriftik or whatever. And I could never forget that, because she went to state prison for upholding our treaty rights for catching fish. She was a kind of an advocate and a rebel in her younger days, and she was elderly at the time, and her father, or her husband, they wasn't married at the time, was a judge in Yakima, Washington for the Yakima tribe or whatever. And so after we'd get done and cleaning the fish and stuff like that, there used to be this loft up above or whatever that was where we'd kind of go rest. Oh, there's nets. I can relax on the nets and rest or whatever before it's time to go out fishing. And there was these, I don't know what they're exactly called, but they're like laundry bins. So they have like 4 wheels on the wheel, and there's like burlap, and you see them in hotels, and they put their clothes and stuff like in there. And I start looking in there, and there was these big like books, like notebooks, or kind of like binders or whatever. And what that was U.S. Supreme Court decisions that upheld our treaty fishing rights, court cases. And I was like, wow, I'm learning policy about my tribal people. That's when all the way that, it's important. When I used to have newspapers, I used to like reading newspapers and stuff like that. And I read that stuff, and it didn't really sink in at that time or whatever. But when I became moved seasonally, and I met my future mother of my children, she was going to school at Arizona State University, and I moved to Tempe. And I was going to Scottsdale Community College, and it was a policy class. And then it kind of all came back around or whatever that, hey, this is policy that our people have already went to the Supreme Court over our treaty fishing rights and stuff that is relevant to our tribal people. All of our tribal people should know this stuff, but it's not taught in our schools and stuff like that. And so that was really important for me to absorb that at the time or whatever, and absorb all the teachings that was teaching me or whatever. And it allowed me to be where I'm at professionally, and without those lessons in, reading binders in a laundry basket or whatever, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I really wouldn't be, because I don't have no education. And I did well for myself and working for my people, for over 21 years now for Kriftik in different capacities, and that's really important. And I'll never forget those teachings, because I wouldn't be where I'm at.
Are you guys seeing why I needed my laptop and I couldn't do this with just a notebook? I think there are some things that you just shared that, like you were saying, you didn't even learn about them. And I would imagine there's a lot of people who, like if we were to say the fish wars, it is not as familiar of a piece of our history. And so I want to make sure we're clear on some of that stuff.
Sure.
So one of the things, and you correct me when I say something wrong, is
Correct you.
is at the same time that there was a big civil rights battle going on that I think most of us probably know about, here in the Pacific Northwest, there was a civil rights battle going on that connected to history far longer than any of us had been here. And that since forever.
Time immemorial.
Yeah. And this, what we can share here tonight, won't begin to explain it well enough, but these 4 treaty tribes, as you mentioned in the beginning, Umatilla, Warm Springs, Nez Perce, Yakima, We probably, I would imagine most of us understand about these 4 reservations, and we've heard of Indian reservations. And land being used by these tribes no longer being used. And what did stick around, though, even with all that displacement, was usual and accustomed fishing rights and fishing access. And so I think you can't really emphasize the importance of salmon enough. Then if you look at the history and you say, of all the things that changed, the right to go fish still in your usual and accustomed places was the thing that folks held on to. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and we got to be, so the way I explain that or whatever is that when in the 1850s when they came with treaties and stuff like that, you know, we ceded millions and millions of acres, you know, to the U.S. government or whatever, and we ceded those millions of acres reluctantly, you know, came to us in a language that we didn't understand, and put things in the treaty or whatever. But our ancestors and our treaty signers and our leaders at the time says, yeah, we will reluctantly cede those lands, but we're not going to give up our right to hunt, fish, and gather at our usual and custom places. And that was put in the treaties. So that's why we're treaty tribes that have treaty fishing rights, because it was in the treaty. And those Supreme Court decisions that I talked about are all because of that treaty. You know, Umatilla, Pendleton's, you know, 2 hours away. That's not on the reservation, but those rights for us were in that treaty, and they've stood up through those court decisions and stuff like. Sure, it's eroded, and it's been some of the trueness of those laws, but you know, we gotta remember that our ancestors wouldn't sign those treaties without those rights that we would have, like I say. So that's where you say the usual and accustomed places or whatever, you know. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I mean, and some of the things that, you know, at this point are second nature for you to bring them up. I'm here to say, I can play I'm the dum-dum who's like, I remember when I didn't know what that meant. And so you know, UNA rights, usual and accustomed rights, when you talked about, is it Mary? When Mary went to jail. So at the time of the civil rights battles that were going on, you know, all over the country, but the civil rights stories that we're more familiar with, the civil rights battle that was going on here in the Northwest is tribal members were being arrested, often quite aggressively. Nets were being cut. When I was researching the podcast that I first met you in, watching some of the video of women being pulled by their nets out of their boats by fishing game wardens, state fishing game warden. So it's a really complex and important history that underpins the importance of salmon. It also, and we won't go into this now, but also is a very interesting backdrop to the current, or at least a year ago, conversations between the states and the tribes now talking nationally about the Columbia River and salmon. But so I think another piece that I would love to have you talk about is across the river from us here in Hood River is a site called an inlu site. And maybe you guys know it. If you're familiar with the mouth of the White Salmon River, you've maybe noticed there's trailers there, and that is a inlu site. Do you want to explain what an inlu site is? Because I think we should all know.
So in the late 30s, you know, hydroelectricity dams came, and they flooded and inundated with Bonneville Dam our traditional fishing areas and our fishing villages along the river. And you know, the real one, it was in the late 50s when it flooded Slilo Falls or whatever. Our real traditional, at one time Slilo Falls was like known as the Wall Street of the West, because there was so much trade and commerce going on with the fishing sites. You see some of the pictures, the old pictures of our tribal members dip netting fish and stuff like that on the falls and stuff like that. So in the 30s, Bonneville Dam, late 30s or whatever, Bonneville Dam was built, and it flooded some of those traditional villages, and our fishing access sites are where we fished and gathered. And so that became in lieu of us flooding your traditional villages and your fishing sites, we'll develop these 5 in lieu sites along the Columbia River, and those being Underwood, Lone Pine, and the Dalles, I think Wind River, Leto, and Underwood as the 5 original in lieu sites. So the government gave us those areas or whatever. They identified the properties there, and then the government also promised that we will also build you. The government did keep their word. It only took them 50 years. And so they built, we identified some, well, not us, so I guess our tribes and the Army Corps, and one of our staff identified these areas along the river, and that we was to build these other sites here at Stanley Rock across the river. When you go across the Hood River Bridge, you'll see that site on the Bingen side where there was behind the Mount Adams Visitor Center. That's an access site. So there's 5 original in lieu sites, and then there's 28 additional treaty fishing access sites. So our traditional treaty fishing area is from Bonneville Dam all the way to McNary. It's called Zone 6. And so that there's sites all the way up and down the river that our fishers that they built. So those are treaty fishing access sites and in lieu sites.
And the only commercial fishing, there we can have sport fishing in Zone 6, but the only commercial fishing that can go on in Zone 6 is tribal commercial fishing.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is a really important section of river that the gorge happens to fall on. And I think I think it's important to note that these in lieu sites, these fishing treaty access, were not necessarily meant to be lived at, but there were people who said, and people who still do say, though these reservations, that's not where we're going to go. We want to stay here with the river, with the salmon.
Correct. Yeah. So a lot of people that at the time or whatever, the reservations were there. This is where their livelihood. This is where their ancestors were from. They didn't want to go back to back Yakima or to Warm Springs or whatever. This is where their bloodlines were from and stuff like that. And so you're actually right, they was made for seasonality use. And so a lot has changed when I first started working at the treaty fishing access sites, or the fishing site maintenance department, what it was called, in 2004. As we know, in the gorge, you all being residents of the gorge, society had a lot to do with that. What's affordable housing in the gorge? It's not just a tribal problem. It's a society problem. And so the lack of affordable housing for our tribal members made that these uses were used year round. Some of these places have a bathroom, a men's and women's shower bathroom, fishing net racks. Most have water access, fish cleaning tables, and some camping areas, and we got the management, I think, in 2002 or 2003 from another company or whatever, where Kriftik took the management of those sites, and we were supposed to have a budget of that for, they anticipated 50 years. That budget's it's depleted because of the over kind of use of that, and it's kind of, kind of sad. We've got some appropriation money for some improvements and stuff like that, but it's yeah, it's kind of a society thing. You know, it's not just a tribal issue. You know, I'm sure there's people that, you know, I know in one of the boards that I'm on, and you know, some of their staff have had to turn down jobs because they couldn't afford housing in the gorge. You know, and that isn't something that goes across all colors, barriers, you know, of people. You know, farmland in Hood River is most expensive in the state and stuff like that. You folks know that. So that's really been kind of an issue with these tribes or whatever, and we do the best we can. Miguel is actually the manager here that's sitting in the front row by my daughter there, and I started in 2004, and he came on a few years after, and we've seen a lot of changes in the things and the number of people that live there.
Yeah, they've gone up.
Oh, more people there. There used to be no buildings and hardly at all, and no people that stayed there year round and stuff like that. And now there is people staying there because, like, you know, like I said, some of these issues and stuff like that that impact all of us as community members along the river.
Well, I think that's a great segue to one of the things that came up, and this is where I think going back to the Community Health Collective and how we can work together and what changed, and sometimes there can be a silver lining, and the change in CRITFIC is, so now you're out here and you're working for CRITFIC and you're doing salmon marketing, and the pandemic hits. And there, all of a sudden, it's discovered there's a pretty big loophole for these people that live here along the river and are not who are tribal members but not on the reservations. So tell us what happened when the pandemic hit and what challenge became visible and maybe why.
So when the pandemic hit or whatever, we, you know, it impacted a lot of things. You know, it was all unknown times to us or whatever. You know, I think if I remember right, Wild Horse, which is on the Umatilla Reservation, had one of the first COVID positives test of a staff, if I remember right, at the reservation there. And so he's in the office in Portland, because our main office is in Portland by the Lloyd District and by the Lloyd Center. And we start getting the Umatilla tribal members, they start calling our office like, hey, you're from Umatilla, you know, do you know what's going on in this COVID and stuff like that? And I was like, well, no, not really, or whatever, you know. I was like, what's COVID? And then it became, you know, that worldwide thing or whatever, where the shutdowns came, and then early on in the COVID, a group of I guess different entities or partners, I guess you would call them, or organizations started having these meetings virtually by Zoom, and it's turned into you know, there was it's now turned into Gorge Native American collaboration. So when we first started having these meetings, and I was really early on in meeting these meetings with the next door Nichiwana Housing. I think one community health was at some of these meetings, some regional tribal organizations, and I came into these meetings like, you know, I've talked about the tribal members that live at the treaty fishing access at like loose sites. It's like, how am I going to get food to my tribal members that are out there? As we remember, how am I going to get toilet paper to them? How am I going to get masks? How am I going to do this stuff? And so we started working with these things that probably we should have been having many years ago, these kind of groups that are, you know, identifying our things, our tribal members and the needs they have. You know, something that really impacted us in finding out about COVID is that we had a senior Yakima tribal member from a Yakima nation that was senior CRIFTIC staff pass away from COVID super early. So what that did is that and he was a tribal fisherman who was employed with Cryptic, probably at that time one of the longest tenured tribal members at the staff. So he was a tribal fisher, and he was a bridge between our tribal ways and things like that. Was a leader at Salilo Village, and our non-tribal staff, because Cryptic isn't all tribal or whatever. So he kind of was that bridge and taught them, some of the stuff I've talked about and the ways of our world. But what that really did is that this is happening to our people right here in the gorge. It's not just in the Far East over there. It's not up in Kirkland, Washington at the senior center where they're looking in at their patients there. This is happening here. And it really put it like a priority on what are we going to do for our tribal members? And so in those meetings or whatever, and we start doing food distributions with a non-tribal group and doing some good things and getting food out there. And then, like I said, I was at these meetings. There was a few Cryptic staff in there, and then there was then we start getting in one of those policy people I told about Cryptic at the things, and kind of this is Buck Jones analysm that I saw. I was on the ground playing marbles or whatever, playing checkers or whatever, and then our senior staff was like, what can we do to get health care for our tribal members that are along the river? What can we do to help get some kind of, because Indian health services, who most of our tribes go through, and there's no Indian health services along the gorge, and so you have to go to Warm Springs, hour away. You have to go to Yakima if you're a Yakima tribal member, and you can only go to those tribes and do that. If you're living down here at Cascade Locks, you have to go back home to Pendleton. It's 2+ hours, and if you live in Nez Perce, it's 6 hours to go get health care. So what that did is that we started partnering, and one community health stepped up, and we worked with the Oregon Health Authority. Cryptic did. We became partners with Oregon Health Authority Tribal Affairs, Julie Johnson, and we ended up getting funding to where we got funding to get masks, hand sanitizers, because as you know at the time, there was no hand sanitizers, stuff like that, and was it the distillery start making hand sanitizer, and then there was the knitting groups that was in making masks and things like that, and we had no idea about that, and then we kind of just took that on. My supervisor right now, we just start kind of taking these things on and hey, we need to get these out there. And one community health took up and made a priority of our tribal members at that point, through Oregon Health Authority. We got vaccine testing, tests for them, and so we would have testing events and at some of the villages, the Salilo Village, and then at some of the treaty fishing access sites, and doing those testings, and it just morphed into more of a social service role that Cryptic came in, and we became partners with one community health, like I said, with Oregon Health Authority. At one time, we was getting so much supplies. Our whole 5th floor on our office in Portland was like a supply center. We just had all this different kind of thing, but we was putting it out there for our people, and then it actually worked into where that, then we start getting vaccines, and we start having vaccines events with new kind of a thing like this, because there's a term in fisheries or whatever, it's called graying of the fleet. And graying of the fleet is the grandfathers and stuff like that, they're used to the hard work and stuff like that, but the younger generation, like farmers, the farmers and stuff, get up at 4 a.m. and then work all day, and then come shower up and go to the school board meeting and stuff like that. But the young ones don't want to do that. They don't want to do all that work, and they don't. I'm being honest or whatever, They don't want to know their journey. They want to get your phone and see what's what's at the end of the trip without going through all this. But anyway, that really formed into.
Were you were you directing that?
Well, I'm just as bad.
My kids were up there, maybe you guys.
I'm just as bad. So no. But I think what I'm trying to say is, or whatever, that it's our tribal members don't do that because it's so much ingrained to us in doing that. But we can't have people go out to the river and then die because of a disease. So we did what we could. So we turned that social service role, and actually at the beginning of 2024, and I think with something that, with the passing of our elder from Salilo Village or whatever, that the legacy of Cryptic and that is that we've turned a role to help our tribal members that we never did it for, since the mid-70s or whatever, and that partnerships that we've built with One Community Health and other organizations, and being there for the people is really like a monumental moment or whatever. So out of that, and since 20 food sovereignty comes in on our salmon marketing, we actually received funding for USDA, big USDA grants that we was a pass through our member tribes to purchase local food within 400 miles for our tribes to put food on the table for our people. And then, we had an outreach team that we had to have on the river here to do the relationship that we built with One Community Health kind of is formed because of COVID. And that's huge. That was whenever COVID started, It used to be where was he when 9/11 was. Now it's like where was he when COVID was at. That's really monumental.
So one of the things, and Alex, if you can raise the house lights, and we'll shift, and I want to get folks questions. If they had questions or things they wanted to ask, they could submit it online. And I'm wondering if maybe you just answered this, but I still want to ask. One of the questions we got was, since working in the position that you now have at CRITFIC, what do you feel is the most important part of your job, and how has that work benefited the tribal fishermen along the river? So you answer that. I'm going to do a little mic switch.
Oh, you don't need your
I don't
glasses
need it
for
for
it.
reading. I can't see the audience, but I'm fine.
Okay. Most important part of your job?
I think the most important part of my job is working for my people and working for the people that we represent. I'm really fortunate in the position that I'm at and where I've been, to be an advocate for my people, to be at the table and be a voice. And that's important, because Cryptic's allowed me to be in a lot of places or whatever. I'm a board member of quite a few organizations and things like that. It's allowed me to be there, to be that. So I think working for my people is the most beneficial for me, because that, to me, that's it, And I think that, the model that was set up by Les and stuff like that, we're trying to set our own improvements. We sell a lot of fish or whatever, but we need to get our fish out in the world or whatever, because there's other tribes that are selling their fish directly, and we have a processing center right across the river or whatever that we'd like to be able to say, like, not just give the fish to the wholesale buyers and they're making that money, still kind of that vision that our ancestors had. I would like this one of these days where, like, wow, that processing center's going and we're sending our fish, throughout the world, throughout the Northwest, and it's not the wholesale buyers that are making the money, and it's our tribes that I don't want to. If I could help get that going, that would really satisfy me. And at this point, we're not there, and that's a little bit kind of the reason I kind of took this role or whatever. And I hope, I have to work till I got all gray hair and try to get that, and that's what I want to do.
All right. Does anyone have a question or something they want to hear from Buck? Don't be shy. Can be basketball or salmon. Yes, sir.
I'll just stand up.
Well, I'm going to use the mic
Okay.
so folks know live stream.
Thank you. Grateful to be here. Grateful for everything that you do. I'm curious, though.
how does farm-raised salmon fit within your culture?
Yeah.
Hatchery versus wild.
No, even farm is different. Yeah, it is. We're not. I'm not against some kind of farm fishing. I'm against pen net farm fishing. Salmon is meant to go out. You know, it can survive in freshwater. It survives, and then it goes into the ocean. Pen net fishing is so impactful, and so it's not. You know, probably
Do
a
you
lot,
want-
lot of the shrimp I eat's probably farm. You know, a lot of the shrimp you eat's probably farm. It's not wild caught. You know, it's just against the grain of our fishery of farm raised. I tell you a story when I went to San Diego one year, and you got these docks there that have these potpourris of shrimp cocktails or whatever. And it's like, oh, this looks good, crab, shrimp, whatever else, and then didn't even think about it. Took a bite of that salmon. They can put all kinds of additives and stuff like that in the farm fish that it's never gonna put as that it is a wild caught salmon. You know, it's not. You know, it's not made to be in a net and raised in a net.
All right, anyone else?
Hi.
It's Emma.
Hi, Emma.
Hi. I'm curious, you talk about that the dollar value going back to the tribes on the salmon marketing and the sales. What are some of the biggest challenges or opportunities you see now in that work and where you want to take it?
I got to be careful with that one. I'll just speak for my tribe. My tribe, there's a lot of tribal politics that happen within tribes, within my member tribe or whatever. We're an organization of 4 tribes. And so sometimes we're our worst enemy. You know, the plant that you're well aware of across the way was made for the intention of getting these. It hasn't lived up to its intention, you may as well say, for 20 years now. That being said, you know, it's, I think you can look at some other tribes like Quinault and stuff like that. They're putting fish out in their canneries and things like that. So it's, I'll just be real kind of, hopefully I'm not offending any of my tribes and stuff like that, politics has played a lot of to the, of not being where we're at, where we should be.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Politics. Gosh darn it, we just. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just speaking of politics, I'm wondering, I haven't been keeping up on it, but with the Columbia River Treaty, is that making, is the treaty going to fulfill the request of the tribes to include tribal interests?
Depends on what day it is. You know, it was when it was signed 50 years ago or whatever. Passage wasn't nothing there for the salmon and stuff like that. You know, it was impacted. You know, as Columbia starts all the way up in the headwaters of up in British Columbia. The First Nation tribes up there wasn't a part of the initial Columbia River Treaty. Now, this isn't my expertise, but I try to have an elevator spiel about almost everything or whatever. That we've been told through one of our persons that work in it for it really works on the Columbia River Treaty that, you know, the tribes and the First Nations at one point didn't have a seat at the table. And that, you know, the hydroelectricity and the power PUDs and things like that, it was more for them, you know. I mean, it was, if you remember right, the reason they came up with that was the flooding of Vanport down there and stuff like that. So flood control and stuff was like that. But, you know, the history of dams being built without fish ladders and things like that is you know, that wasn't that long ago, you know. And so I think that what we've heard from our staff or whatever, that it looks like that the tribes are going to have a presence at the table, and the First Nations or whatever, but then, you know, next week it might not be. But so hopefully it will be, we will have, and they will, you know, include some of the restoration and the passage of the salmon and the fish that move up and down the river.
Okay, I want to do one more, and then we'll do a quick.
Oh, you got
Who's
more
the
than
make?
one.
I want to get this side of the room here. Hold on.
Thanks, Bud. Can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure. Can you share with me what your life would have been like had you been able to hold on to your horses and still play basketball? Did you ever imagine being able to do both?
You know, I don't know if I could, but I probably, and we got them all. Miguel knows about this. We got people that never, they got everything they need on their reservation. I was like, why would I go anywhere else? I can go hunting when I want to go. I can go fishing when I want to go fish. I would probably be on the res, and I probably wouldn't have left. My father was somebody like that never left, really left his home, because that was his home. He had everything he needed there. And that would probably be me. You know, I would have probably became a horseman, been a landowner and things like that. I probably wouldn't have been able to. Somebody had told me once that go travel and see the world when you're young. Because a lot of people work their whole lives, and then they think, oh, I'm going to retire and go to work. Oh, my health's not allowing me to do that stuff. So I've been really fortunate in being able to see different things of the world, be in different places in the country, and meet a lot of friends that I might not have been if I was just a horseman.
All right. I want to. This is your chance to start stretching out for our plan, okay? So just mentally. Are you ready for that? Do you remember what we talked about in the green room? You don't have to do it yet. I just
okay.
want you to be prepared.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. While you get mentally prepared, Alex, do you mind? I want to do a couple. Yeah, definitely take the glasses off for this.
I do.
So a couple quick things before we wrap things up. We have opened the Sense of Place RFP online. So we have folks come to us in two ways to be a part of the Sense of Place program. Sometimes we seek them out and do direct outreach because not everyone knows about Sense of Place. And so we go find people. But then we also have people who come to us and say, I know something interesting and I have some expertise and I would like to share it. And if you are one of those people, we have opened our request for proposals. It's now online. If you or someone you know might be a good fit for Sense of Place, send them our way. I say this each season. I don't want to take all credit, but Chuck Sams did Sense of Place and then went to run the National Park Service. I don't know what Buck's gonna do. Who knows? We had this lamprey biologist who opened his talk with a rap song about lamprey, which I now credit for being part of the impetus for this next slide, which is the Watershed Rock Opera. So if you don't know about it, then you probably haven't talked to me for the past year, because it's kind of what I'm talking about a lot. So the Watershed Rock Opera is the culminating event of Sense of Place. It is happening in April. We'll have 4 performances. I anticipate them selling out. It is a multimedia musical romp from sky to river, performing original music with 20 musicians and performers from the gorge. And we're basically following the watershed. We're using the watershed as our framework. We're going to begin in the sky. We're going to hear from a tribal member, actually from Umatilla. Thank you for connecting me with Thomas Morningowl, by the way.
I've been told I'm a convener.
Okay. So we'll hear from Thomas Morningowl in the first movement, and we'll learn about water and the relevance of it to our daily lives now. The water in the watershed then falls to the mountain, where we will meet a wildlife biologist and learn about how her research helped protect a native fox that until 2008, most people in the gorge didn't even know lived here, including wildlife managers. And then we're going to follow the water down into the orchards, because when it comes to the orchards and growing pears, the gorge kicks ass. And we're going to meet a 4th-generation pear farmer, Leslie Tamura, and you will hear her voice and story and learn how to grow a pear while you'll also be seeing musicians play. And then the 4th movement, we end up here in the cities with wastewater management, and a clogged toilet summons a wastewater wizard. And I'm just telling you. And then the last movement is the water has made it to the river, which is really the culmination of all of these stories and all of us. That may be very confusing to hear from me, and so I would highly suggest going to the website, because you will learn more about it. You get to meet some of the people, which is the next slide, Alex. And this is some of the people. This is not everyone. These are your neighbors, friends, local musicians, and performers. I hope you guys recognize a lot of them. And this is where I want to tell you that I would love, love, love to encourage you to go to the website and donate even the tiniest amount, because of 2 things. One, I'm in a fundraising push because I would love to have programs that allow us to tell some of the story of this project and this place to everyone who comes. And 2, I would love to make sure I can continue to pay these people for the time and effort they've put in for the past year. And 3, I thought there was only 2, but there's a 3rd. If you donate now, you will get a heads up about the pre-sale tickets that open on the 20th, which means you'll have a better chance of getting tickets, because I think it will sell out. So consider going to the website and donating to these beautiful, beautiful people via the Watershed Rock Opera. It will be in the Columbia Center for the Arts. I can tell you right now, you will have a marimba, a piano, a drum kit, the string section, a sampler will probably be sitting there. Our composer will be somewhere in the audience. There will be a huge set, and it will be unlike anything you've ever seen before, I promise. I'd love to tell you more about, but we have to go on to next month. Alex, that's the last slide, I think, which is next month, March 12th. Local girl, Lindsay Cornelius, is going to talk to us about oaks. I learned about oaks and started seeing people talk about them more and more at a Mosier Fest, and wondered what was going on. And it turns out there's sort of this renewed interest in just how amazing and important they are. And Lindsay is the gal to hear from for them, because she is so committed to them. So mark your calendars. This is the last official Sense of Place of the season before the opera. So stay tuned. Okay, the one last thing that I want to do is, anyone in this audience who works with or knows Buck, or if you just liked what you heard tonight, stand up, please. Because I know there's a lot of different... Wow, buddy. So as you guys know, at the end of each night, I thank our sponsors, our volunteers, the Healthy Community Collective tonight especially, CCA, Mount Adams Institute, our audience. You may also know that I always thank Kyle, our photographer, and give him a silly pose, but tonight Buck has agreed to be a part of it, and now you guys are also going to be a part of it. We're going to give him a final buzzer beater, you guys. Okay.
Yeah,
You ready?
Right before I do that,
Oh.
I really want to thank you all for being here, and I hope that I didn't bore you too much, and that my story meant something to you, and it will mean something to people coming before us. And I'm just a small kid from my own reservation. So tell them the start.
Yeah. Okay. So we decided that we were going to give Buck a final buzzer beater. So we're going to go 3, 2, 1. Buck's going to drain a shot, despite my incredible defense, and then the crowd's going to go wild. And Kyle, you're going to get the photo. Okay? Okay. Here we go. Are you ready? You can have your hands in your pockets.
Born ready.
Play
I'm born
basketball.
ready.
Okay.
Pass me the
You
ball.
agreed to this.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. I'm on defense. Okay.
So good. Yay, good job. I was gonna say don't hurt your knee on your buzzer beater.